Finally. It's f***ing over. Hey there guys, and welcome to FP1 and the comedy review for the final race of the 2022 season. And can you tell I'm worn out by this stage? But in all seriousness, we've done it. All 22 races covered, and this time only a few hundred people have called me a fat fuck. So before we get into today's video, I just want to say a big thank you to everyone who's liked, commented and subscribed over the past 8 months or so. And if that isn't you, well, you're just one click away from changing that. Yes, I've just turned a heartfelt thank you into a plug. What more did you really expect? Anyway, we have one last race weekend to cover, so without further ado, let's get into the comedy review for the 2022 Abu Dhabi Grand Prix.
We are a fucking bunch of wankers.
Now, we can't talk about this year's race without returning to 12 months ago, can we? Red Bull decided to relive the memories on what's left of Twitter, then was surprised when people got angry at them for it. Don't forget that the team is still in hot water over what went down at the end of the race in Brazil last week. Max Verstappen refusing to give up 6th as if he'd been driving a Haas all year. That meant the battle for second in the championship just got slightly harder for his teammate Sergio Perez, whose crash in Monaco qualifying earlier this year was blamed as the reason behind Max suddenly deciding to be a Allegedly, Perez had crashed on purpose, despite only being third at the time and behind both Ferraris. Checo would also supposedly confess to this to his bosses after the session, which would be a bit like me coming out and claiming the only reason I do sponsored videos is for the money and that I don't actually use any of the products. You know what, I'ma shut up. Point is, I'm 99% sure this story's bullshit, and it now remains to be seen how Sergio will help his teammate going forwards. The other big piece of news this week was Haas finally deciding who to put alongside Kevin Magnussen next year, replacing their current underwhelming German driver with another, older, underwhelming German driver. The signing of Nico Hülkenberg is great for Nico Hülkenberg, and that's about it. I'm not too sure what Haas are going for here. Then again, this is the same team who believe Williams' story. That all means Mick Schumacher will join the likes of Daniel Ricciardo, Sebastian Vettel and Nicholas Latifi in the I'm not going to be in Formula 1 next year club. And yes, before you ask, losing my favourite F1 driver still hurts. Honestly, I've lost all my joke material for the second year in a fucking row. Let's just move on to FP1, which was topped by Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes, fresh off the team's first win of the season in Brazil last week. Sebastian Vettel was a strong P6 ahead of his last weekend in Formula 1, the 4-time world champion's dad bringing several mementos of his career into the back of the Aston Martin garage. These included a cutout of a young Seb in karting, his first race suit, and a giant watch, for some reason. As the old guard prepared to bow out, half of the first practice lineup was made up of junior talent. It seemed as if teams had just forgotten they had to hand 2 FP1 slots to rookies in 2022, and that Alfa Romeo had forgotten that Robert Kubica doesn't actually count as a rookie. He just drives like one. For the most part, the session was without incident, with only Logan Sargent preparing to take over where King Latifi was leaving off, and Pato O'Ward testing the Daniel Ricciardo setup. All 20 full-time drivers were back in their cars as the sun set for FP2. This time it will be Max Verstappen on top for Red Bull. If you thought little happened in FP1, then wait till you see FP2, where the biggest drama of the hour involved different types of concrete. No, I'm not making that up. Since Alpine weren't doing anything seemingly dodgy or illegal for once, McLaren had no one they could report to the FIA, so instead they decided to pick a fight with the concrete making up their pit box, claiming it was slippier than everyone else's. I'm not kidding, they genuinely reported concrete to the FIA. Let's just move on to Saturday. It would be a third different driver leading the way after FP3, as Sergio Perez topped the timing screens come the end of the hour. The final practice of the year was looking like another quiet one, until Pierre Gasly's right rear brow opted to retire to the marina, puncturing the Frenchman's tyre in the process. With debris on the track, the red flag came out. And you know what, it's probably the only one we'll have this weekend, so I'll bring the meme back for all you asking for it. The The stoppage caused some drama for Lewis Hamilton, who passed the cars ahead, forgetting that was only allowed in Abu Dhabi 2021. Just like the FIA, he was able to get away with it though, and that brings us into the qualifying hour. Oh, you know what, I can't wait to read the comments after this one. Q1 saw the two Williams go out as per usual, though the other three drivers in the drop zone were more of a surprise. Gasly and Bottas were 17th and 18th after not being able to hook up a lap at the end, and last week's pole sitter Kevin Magnussen was also out, which was only a surprise as we'd expect to find Mick Schumacher here instead. The German had progressed into Q2, as had Sebastian Vettel, despite having to negotiate a cluster of cars paying tribute to King Latifi through the final corner. And Seb was on fire in the second session yet again, storming to 8th place as Daniel Ricciardo also made it through. That made me very happy. Up at the front though, it was Red Bull continuing to lead the way, with Sergio Perez, but we all know he won't be allowed to finish in front of Verstappen in Q3, don't we? Funnily enough, Red Bull planned to help Checo out here, but conveniently Max's car failed to start up correctly before the final runs. I'll be honest, I've not checked Twitter, but I imagine they're losing their f***ing minds about now. When Max did get out, he was able to soar to a fairly convincing pole position ahead of his teammate, with the Ferraris, who had been absolutely nowhere prior to quali, finding enough form to save Mattia Binotto from being executed for at least another week. Hamilton and Russell would line up on the third row as we got ready for a slightly less controversial Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. But who would come out on top come Sunday? Well, let's jump into the race, and for the final time in 2022, find out. So the lights went out, and despite a good start for Sergio Perez, Verstappen was still able to hold off his teammate down into turn 1. Slightly further back, the Mercedes were on the charge, Hamilton attempting a move on Sainz only to repeat his 2021 line through the chicane. And since it's Abu Dhabi, that meant it was time for the stewards to change their minds on things again, telling Mercedes to give the position back 4 whole laps later, as opposed to leaving the teams to scrap it out between themselves. Lewis let Sainz through, but then 1 lap later was back on the charge, taking the Ferrari round the outside and making us think Merc might just have the pace for a win. How poorly that sentence is about to age. While many teams were paying tribute to Seb Vettel this weekend, Mercedes decided to honour the German by throwing their race away like it was Germany 2018. It all started when Hamilton began to lose power on lap 8, dropping back behind Sainz and soon after behind teammate George Russell. Merc then evened the score when it turned out Russell's pit crew had got on the post-race booze a little too early, holding the Briton up, then releasing him into the path of Lando Norris, a 5-second penalty, the result for car number 63. We'll return to their misfortune later, but let's check in on the real Sebastian Vettel, who was busy fighting the Alpines for P8. Now I say Alpines, though I'm not too sure what Fernando Alonso was doing, or who he was actually driving for this weekend. He sort of just chilled behind Sebastian as he watched him take bites out of Ocon in front. Once Alpine worked this out, a mysterious water leak occurred, the team using their piss-poor reliability to their advantage. It would have been even better had they made Fernando pull over to the side, as this was Abu Dhabi after all, and a safety car was really needed at this point. As a result, many were asking the same question: where is Nicholas Latifi? And unfortunately, he was chilling at the back and being well behaved for once. Thankfully, Mick Schumacher was able to remind the GOAT of his purpose into the hairpin. Except he didn't do the best of jobs. With only a slightly crooked rear wing, Latifi was able to continue. Let's be real, he was never going quick enough to properly use that anyway. With the Grand Prix now entering its final phases, we all woke up to find Sergio Perez somehow behind Charles Leclerc, and yeah, I really don't know how that happened either. This meant the Mexican had to use fresh tyres to close up and pass the Ferrari if he wanted P2 in the Drivers' Championship. Oh, and he had #blessed in the way as well. It took a couple of attempts, but the Mexican was able to make it past the Mercedes, who was now worried about the second Ferrari of Carlos Sainz catching up behind. Maybe Lewis should have been more concerned about his car, however, the W13 finally deciding it couldn't be f***ed with 2022 anymore and conking out with just a couple of laps to go. The silver linings of that meant both Ricciardo and Vettel were now in the points, though the same couldn't be said of poor Nicholas Latifi, who had to retire the car with just 1 lap left of the season to go. Guess that's still better than last year though. So Max Verstappen then came across the line to win his 15th race of the season. We haven't spoken about him much at all, but there really isn't that much to say. He was completely dominant today. Leclerc was able to hold off Perez for P2 on the road and in the championship, and with that, F1 in 2022 has finally come to an end. Now the last race, let's be real, wasn't brilliant, and I do think it would be better to fill this time with a bit of a tribute to those leaving us, and recapping some of their best moments.
You've done it! four-time world champion. And you join the greats, mate. You're up there. There's Fangio, Schumacher, then you.
I don't know what to say. I'm completely empty.
Left Red Bull, he went to Renault, he's gone to McLaren, he's going to get the victory now. It's McLaren and Ricciardo that win the Italian Grand Prix.
And for anyone who thought I left, I never left. Just moved aside for a while.
Mick, P8, points, buddy, points, you did it. P8, you did it. Well done, amazing. Look at that racing at the end too, absolutely brilliant.
Finally, I told you guys this is the weekend. Oh my god.
This is it from
You guys are brilliant. You guys are brilliant. You guys are brilliant.
Oh no, Nicholas Latifi.
So that's it then. Sort of. You see, I have plenty of sponsorship commitments to make before the end of the calendar year, so there'll be a few more videos to come before the cars are rolled out again for round 1 in 2023. If you did enjoy this video though, be sure to get subscribed. We're still trying to hit 60,000 subs by the end of 2022. So if you haven't yet, I'd really appreciate you clicking on that big red button below this video. A final thank you goes out to all of my patrons, and if you want to help out in that regard, the links to that, along with all of my other socials, are down in the description below. But for now, that's all from me, so I'll see you next week with another video, but until then, have a good one.